Kent, you may be preaching to the choir here, but I thought I'd begin by asking just why is it important to make long-term budget projections?
Yeah, they essentially tell you where you're headed and if it's even plausible to be headed in that direction. And so, what we're forecasting is a rising debt to GDP ratio. At some point, financial markets are not going to buy the fact that it can continue to increase indefinitely. And so we have to kind of understand the path that we're on and whether we're actually sustainable.
And so at the Penn Wharton Budget Model, you took a look at this and just like kind of in a nutshell, what were your major findings?
Yeah. So what we're projecting is that under current law, and this includes the sunsets and for the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act that will actually produce some additional revenue, that debt will increase government debt that is debt held by the public. So it's not including debt that the government holds of its own, but that debt held by the public will increase to 225% of GDP by 2050 and then continue to rise even after that. And some people might think, well, that's far into the future, but if you're a 30-year bond investor or you're an investor in longer term projects, you have to be thinking out there, and financial markets do look longer horizon.
I want to get Tori and Steve in, but on your long-term projections, I watch these things rather closely, and I noticed that your projections seem to be a little bit more pessimistic than the last set of numbers from the Congressional Budget Office. Right. Your revenues were lower, spending was consistently a little bit higher, and so the debt was, I think they were at about 175% of GDP in 2050. And of course, that would make sense if accumulating over that time. So right. Really, I just wanted to, without getting too much into the weeds, why your numbers a little bit more optimistic?
Yeah, and just to be clear, even though sometimes we're compared with CBO, we love the CBO. It's my first job after my PhD. I worked there for 3 years. I have very fond memories. The approaches are different, and the CBO, it takes a much more top-down approach where they start with the aggregate numbers and then they adjust those over time. And however, the United States is going through very rich demographic changes, and so that's where some of the more straight line projections become a little bit more challenging. So what we do is we start with a very bottom up approach where we have very rich heterogeneity amongst households. Households are differentiated by over 60 different attributes, and we see how that changes over time. And in particular, that bottom-up approach captures a lot more demographic kind of richness. We also do differ a little bit on some of the assumptions we're making about what's called excess healthcare cost growth. In particular, they tame it down a little bit faster than we do because we believe that some of the gains that we've seen in healthcare costs in the last couple of years are actually temporary, and we'll get back into having some excess cost growth in the future. And so we're and again, some of that still is coming from demographics as well, with an aging population, and then even a lower fertility rate over time, and how that varies demographically. So that the bottom-up approach will naturally create a bit more resolution there, and that's what's leading to the more pessimistic numbers.